Two much-anticipated returns and the first goalie fight in the NHL in nearly 6 years. Welcome to Short Shifts, a product of the NHL Wraparound podcast for Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. Vic Morren with you. Neil is traveling today, and he'll be traveling Friday as well. Originally, we had planned to do NHL Wraparound on that day. However, a major winter storm is going to be coming through the mid-Atlantic states. Neil wants to get out in front of that, and he'll be making the trip up from South Carolina to New Jersey on Friday instead of Saturday, which was his original plan. But a big reason for that is because on Monday evening, Neil will be part of the latest in a series of celebrations that the New York Rangers are having in honor of their 100th anniversary season. This one having a particular focus on the 1994 Stanley Cup championship team. So you think Neil's legend has grown a little bit given the season that the Rangers are having? So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of reception he gets at Madison Square Garden Monday night. Let's move on to things taking place on the ice, and two much-anticipated returns, very different in nature, taking place on Monday. Jonathan Toews turns to the United Center for the first time since April 13th, 2023. A terrific video tribute, a 3.5-minute ovation, and usually the player that's getting recognized comes out to center ice, takes one spin around, pats his chest, acknowledges the fans, acknowledges the opposition. But on this night, Toews came out on 3 different occasions going around the rink, and Captain Serious even smiling and really taking in this entire moment. And for me personally, this was the biggest ovation that I've seen any player get since Maurice Richard, the closing of the Montreal Forum in March of 1996. Now, the game didn't go as planned for the Jets. They lost 2-0, but did manage to beat St. Louis 4-1 on Tuesday. The Jets still 7 points back for the second wild card in the Western Conference. The other significant return on Monday took place in Sunrise, Florida, where Matthew Tkachuk made his season debut against the San Jose Sharks. He played on a line with Evan Rodriguez and Mackie Samoskevich. He had no points, but he did have 3 shots on goal and 3 other shots blocked. And it didn't take long for him to return right into the middle of the fray. Got a roughing penalty engaging with Vincent Desharnais at 8:42 of the first period. But now we're actually going to shift over to Desharnais because he became a very significant player in all 3 periods of this game. And after his dust-up with Tkachuk in the first, he scored the eventual game-winning goal for the Sharks at 2:41 of the second period. What was significant about this was that he entered this game with 1 career goal in 185 NHL games. But there's more, because in the third period, Desharnais tripped up Samoskevich. He was then bumped into by Rodriguez, and in the ensuing scrum, Sharks goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic left his crease to join in, and at the other end of the rink, Sergei Bobrovsky said, I want to be a part of this, and made the 200-foot padded sprint down the ice to engage with Nedeljkovic in the first goalie fight in the NHL since February 1st of 2020. And when I got the notice, it said it was between Cam Talbot and Mike Smith in the Battle of Alberta. But it didn't say who was playing for who. And if you remember, both Smith and Talbot played for both the Flames and the Oilers. But on this night, Smith with Edmonton, Talbot for Calgary. And I'll have to say, that fight was better than the one between Nedeljkovic and Bobrovsky, but not as good as the ones that Patrick Waugh had with Mike Vernon in 1997 and Chris Osgood in 1998 at the height of the Red Wings Avalanche rivalry. And just a footnote to that Flames-Oilers game about 6 years ago. You know who else had a fight that night? Matthew Tkachuk against the Oilers' Ethan Bear. But anyway, the end result, a 4-1 win for the San Jose Sharks, who continue to hold on to a wild card position in the Western Conference, even though on Tuesday they dropped the second of their back-to-back, losing to the Lightning 4-1. The Lightning 13-0-1 in their last 14 games, outscoring the opposition 63-31 in the process. Let's talk some Buffalo Sabres. And sometimes you see more from a team in a loss than you do in a win. And in this game, they lost a 2-1 decision to the Carolina Hurricanes on Monday. But the way they played at the end of that game, pushing for the tying goal, pinning the Hurricanes in their own end, they're playing like a club that wants to stick around for a little bit longer in the race to make the playoffs after this 14-year drought. Brandon Bussi, outstanding in the Carolina net in this one, becomes the first goaltender in NHL history to win 18 games in his first 22 starts. Of course, this is one of these square pegs in round holes kind of stats that gets thrown out there. But nonetheless, very impressive, and victimized Tage Thompson, sniper of the Sabres, a half dozen times in that one. So very impressive outing by the Sabres, and they bounced back on Tuesday, defeating the Nashville Predators, who've been playing improved hockey as well, by a 5-3 score. This was a 3-0 lead in the first period for the Sabres, got it to 4-0. Predators got it back to 4-3 before the Sabres added an empty net goal. This is a game in years past that maybe gets away from Buffalo, but once again, another example of this team continuing to mature in the 2025-26 season. They enter play on Wednesday, Wild Card 1. Let's talk some Montreal Canadiens. You remember at the start of the season, late game comebacks and heroics were the norm at the Bell Center. Then the team went on a little bit of a dry spell in their own building. But the last two games, the drama has returned. First, let's go back to Saturday in Ottawa. They were down 5-3, got 2 goals in the final 5 minutes. And then Cole Caulfield, with his 4th overtime winner of the season, gave the Habs the victory in that one. Then on Tuesday, against the Minnesota Wild, in a game that saw a couple of very questionable penalties called by referee Eric Furlap against Lane Hudson, Canadians managed to overcome that. It's 3-3 late in the third period, and it's Caulfield again with 15 seconds left, finding a soft spot in the Minnesota defense and taking a feed from Nick Suzuki to win the game. So the Canadians, third in the Atlantic, only 3 points behind the first place Lightning. On Short Shifts on Monday, one of the games that we were looking at on Tuesday was Boston at Dallas. Bruins entered the game with a 6-game winning streak, and the Stars were in a 2-6-4 funk. And to make matters worse, Mikko Rantanen was going to miss the game for Dallas, out with an illness. And of course, what happens is a 6-2 Dallas win. You think Jason Robertson's not a little bit ticked off? He was not named to the U.S. Olympic team. Scores his 28th and 29th goals. Had 17 shot attempts. 9 of those were on goal. And he continues to make a statement that if there is an opening due to injury, he's got to be a player that is absolutely considered by GM Bill Guerin. Let's talk some Vancouver Canucks who managed to stay in the news, sending pending unrestricted free agent Kiefer Sherwood to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for second-round picks in both this year's and next year's entry draft. Undrafted defenseman Cole Clayton is also acquired by the Canucks as part of this deal. This comes on the same day that General Manager Patrick Allvin gave a vote of confidence to Adam Foote and his coaching staff. Taking a look at this, Allvin traded Hughes. He traded Sherwood. Thatcher Demko can't stay healthy. The Canucks are in the midst of an 11-game winless streak after a 4-3 loss to the Islanders on Monday. This team is in last place by 9 points in the overall league standings. And as much as we've taken a look at Chris Drury in New York at the job that he has done dismantling the Rangers, this is a very similar situation that is going on in Vancouver. And for Patrick Allvin, instead of looking at Adam Foote, take a look in the mirror yourself. Let's move on. So in this next segment, the word figure is going to come up rather prominently. So go figure. On Monday, the Flyers played in Vegas against the Golden Knights. Vegas entered with a 7-game winning streak, having scored 36 goals during their run. The Flyers came in on a 6-game losing streak, having surrendered 31 goals in those half dozen games. So what happens? It's a 2-1 win for the Flyers. Travis Konecny scoring both goals, the winner coming shorthanded in the third period. It figures. Jersey and Calgary, 2 of 3 teams entering Monday's game with the most times being held to 1 goal or less. Devils and the Rangers, 16 times, and the Flames, 14 times. So, it had to figure that one of the teams was going to be held to 1 goal or less, and that was the Flames, as the Devils win in overtime on a goal by Simon Nemec. And in that game, the Devils lost Luke Hughes for the balance of their road trip, at the very least, appeared to injure his right shoulder in the second period. So the Devils head down to Edmonton to play on Tuesday. Can you figure? Because the Devils were the second worst team in the NHL since the 23-24 season on the second night of back-to-backs, and they beat the Oilers by the same 2-1 score that they had beat the Flames the night earlier. Cody Glass, one of the players that has really delivered a little bit of offense in a season that has seen the Devils struggle to score goals, gets his 11th goal and an assist, but in a little bit of a scheduling quirk here. This was the first of 4 consecutive games for the Oilers against teams that come into Rogers Place having played Calgary the night before. The Oilers play the Penguins on Thursday, they play the Caps on Saturday, and they play the Ducks on Monday the 26th. All 3 of those teams playing back-to-backs, having played the Flames the night before. Let's go from those figures to some actual figures. And one of the stats that has kind of jumped off the page for me this year has been the number of empty net goals that have taken place. When you pull your goalie, the chances of you scoring are about 15%. And conversely, you give up an empty net goal about 35% of the time. On Monday, when the Rangers gave up an empty netter against Anaheim, it was the 18th time this season that had taken place. Other teams close to the Rangers, the Panthers, 16 empty netters allowed, and the Canucks, 15. I think the record has a very good chance of falling this year because it's 24, held by the 23-24 Jets and the 2015-16 Stars. And for those of us that grew up watching the game in the 60s and the 70s, usually pulled your goalie with a minute left, and rarely was it a deficit of more than one goal. And I think we have seen this change over the last 12 years, probably starting with Patrick Waugh. In the 2013-2014 season, his first year behind the bench for Colorado, he started pulling goalies with 3.5 and 4 minutes left. And of course, nowadays, you see goalies pulled with deficits of 2 and sometimes even 3 goals. So I think when you factor those things in together, that goalies are pulled with greater deficits and with more time left on the clock, that's why you're seeing this rash of empty net goals this season. Let's now move to personnel items, starting with injuries. And for the Carolina Hurricanes, forward Eric Robinson was injured in the first period of the Canes' win against Buffalo on Monday after taking a hit from Sabres captain Rasmus Dahlin. For the Florida Panthers, defenseman Nico Mikkola left with an undisclosed injury in the second period of the Panthers' loss to San Jose on Monday. Remember that Panthers are already without Seth Jones and Dmitry Kulikov on their back line. For the Buffalo Sabres, forward Josh Norris, out week to week with an upper body injury suffered on January 14th against Philadelphia. This is possibly a re-aggravation of the injury that he suffered opening night, which caused him to miss 23 games. For the LA Kings, goaltender Darcy Kemper left Tuesday's win against the Rangers late in the first period with an apparent head injury after New York forward Johnny Brodzinski came through the crease and grazed Kemper. And the Kings also played that game without defenseman Drew Doughty, who was sidelined with an illness. For the Colorado Avalanche, forward Val Nichushkin missed Monday's win against Washington with minor injuries suffered in a car accident en route to the game, so he was held out for precautionary reasons. In that same game, Capitals forward Justin Sordiff returned to the lineup after missing 3 games after taking a puck to the face against Nashville on January 11th. For the Montreal Canadiens, Kirby Dach returned to the lineup against Minnesota on Tuesday after missing 34 games with a broken foot suffered on November 15th. Alexander Texier sat that game out with an upper body injury and is listed day-to-day. And finally, Toronto goaltender Anthony Stolarz may be nearing his return to the Leafs. He has been sent to the Marlies on a conditioning stint. He has not played since November 11th, and it has finally been revealed that it is a nerve issue that he has been dealing with. Checking out the schedule on Wednesday and Thursday. First game I'm looking at on Wednesday, Detroit at Toronto. The Red Wings, 64 points, just 2 back of the Tampa Bay Lightning, though the Lightning have played 2 fewer games. And Toronto continues to make a push towards wild card position. They are in wild card 3 entering play on Wednesday. Also looking at Anaheim and Colorado. The Ducks are on a nice little 4-game winning streak, but you got to remember, back in November, they were 11-3-1, went into Colorado, lost 4-1, and that was kind of the start of the slide that lasted for the better part of 2 months for the Ducks. So let's see how they fare this time around. And also the Islanders at Seattle. Isles face their former coach Lane Lambert, and this is also the last of the 7-game swing for the Islanders. They are 3-2-1 on this trip. And you remember their other 7-game road trip earlier in the season, they were 6-1-0. And on Thursday, looking at Vegas at Boston, we'll see if Rasmus Andersson is able to make his debut for the Golden Knights. He had some immigration issues which prevented him from playing in Monday's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. Also, Florida at Winnipeg. Paul Maurice's current team against Paul Maurice's former team. And Pittsburgh at Edmonton. You know how much Neil and I love that term generational player, but in this case, it's apropos. Sidney Crosby against Connor McDavid. That will wrap up our show for today. Remember that if you tune in to us on either Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, whichever podcast platform you listen to our show, if you're able to write us a review, please do so. We'd really appreciate it. And if you listen to us on YouTube, please subscribe. Our website, NHLWraparound.com, and our blog section, the latest from Patrick Hoffman in New York Centric, focuses on the outstanding job Patrick Roy has done behind the New York Islanders bench this season. I'll be back with Short Shifts again on Friday. Until then, enjoy the hockey Wednesday and Thursday. Take care.